received a picture of your DE students say the photo didn't include a message. Unknown person's account. Duluth public school leaders say there is
exploration to building preservation and everything in between. These talks are one of the many great benefits of having a membership to the History Center of Olmsted County, and we certainly hope that you will continue to join us for these talks, and we also hope that you'll consider getting a membership to experience even more benefits. Michael Melford has had a long career as a photographer and has worked for most national magazines worth working for. In 2003, he made the connection with National Geographic magazine and went on to complete 18 stories for that magazine. Michael now lives here a few miles away with his wife, Dr. Lynn Cornell, having moved from Mystic, Connecticut. We welcome Michael to Rochester and to our History Center. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. So in anticipation, we're going to bring the lights down a little bit so we can see the pictures. I went and got a COVID test yesterday morning just to make sure that I could actually show up. And I was hoping, well, no, I wasn't. But it came back negative, and so I am going to take my mask off, and just because then I'll still mumble my way through this anyways. So yeah, I've done 18 stories for National Geographic after a wonderful career as a photographer. I mean, I was really happy where my career was, and then one day I got the call. It was 2003. I had been working for National Geographic for their travel magazine and their books division and their kids division as well as leading cruise ships and around the world by private jet trips, lecturing. And out of the blue, I got a call from National Geographic, which was a little surprising to me because I had been knocking on that door for years and always told that they couldn't take a chance with someone new. Well, it turns out that 2 other photographers had turned down this job to go to Acadia National Park, and they were desperate. And so they called my editor a traveler, and he recommended me. And so there I got the call. And this was 2003 for you photographers. That's the year I went digital. And so I asked National Geographic if I could shoot it digitally, and they said no, they were not comfortable with digital. So I went up to Maine with my film camera and my digital camera and proceeded to shoot everything in with both. And when I got back, I sit down, we sit, there's a wonderful thing at Geographic, we sit with the editor and we go through the 10,000 images that I shoot in a month and narrow it down to 40. And of the 40, half of them that we showed and half that were printed were digital. So from that moment on, National Geographic was open to digital. And so now almost everyone shoots digitally. After that successful outing and presentation, they offered me to go to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And as it turns out, another photographer who lived out west had the assignment, went to the Great Smoky Mountains, and then he came back to Geographic and said, you know, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. There are too many trees. It's not, you know, it's all closed in. There are too many trees. And he being out west, he's used to these big open landscapes. So I, of course, took the assignment, and I asked if I could go there over 4 seasons. And I found a nice oak tree there that I could shoot over 4 seasons. And then they asked me, this is again 2004, so Acadia was 2003, Great Smoky Mountains was 2004, And then they called and asked if I wanted to do a story on battlefields, battlefield preservation, Civil War battlefield preservation. Well, I never turned down jobs, especially from Geographic. And as it turns out, another photographer had gone out to shoot it. And after the first day came back and said, no, I don't think so. But as chance would have it, my great grandfather was a photographer in the Civil War. Now that's me. That's a modern camera. I had you for a second, didn't I? So anyways, the other photographer, the first place I went was this battlefield in Gaines Mill. And it looked like this. And I went there and I was like, okay, they're cutting down the trees to reclaim the battlefield, to make it look the way it was during 1861 to 1865. And well, anyways, the other photographer saw this and turned around and said, no, I don't think I'm going to do this story. So I was happy to take it. And then from there, they said, okay, there are some reenactments. So why don't you go to a couple of these reenactments? And I wasn't really paying attention in school. I don't even know what grade it was when they taught Civil War. I was probably looking out the window. And so I was learning a lot the whole time on this assignment. And these reenactments, have any of you ever been to a reenactment or taken part in one? I mean, these guys are serious about this. They are sleeping out on the ground. They're eating hardtack. I was staying in a motel, but that's because I was working, of course. Anyways, it was pretty amazing to see the dedication of these men. This was like pre-dawn. Battle had started, and I was able to catch the musket fire coming out of the darkness. And then I went to one of the battlefields right there. That was in Spotsylvania Courthouse in Virginia. And a storm came up, kind of like last night. Wasn't that an amazing storm last night? 77-mile-an-hour winds. And yeah, so, you always wonder if you should be out there when you're seeing lightning. And then the storm went by and I had a beautiful rainbow. I don't know if it shows up there. And then the next day of the reenactment, it just more of this amazing, to me, it was amazing to see people so into this reenactment. And they're so serious. And of course, the Civil War, so that nobody's laughing. There's nothing funny about the Civil War. And this talk will be a little difficult for me because I'm kind of known for being humorous and making a lot of jokes while I'm talking, but I will not be, because there's nothing to laugh about with the Civil War. And so most of my talk is about photography, but I will try and bring in some facts about the Civil War. I mean, some of these guys are living this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. This is their life, This was a young boy. This was another reenactment down in Tennessee. And while I was down there, the gentleman who took my portrait in the wet plate, the tintype, a gentleman named Robert Zabo, who's watching in on Zoom. I saw him working. I was like, whoa, what is this guy doing? Because he's got a camera like this, the old style, which I used to use, not the wet plate, but the view camera. You put the cape over your head. And he was making these wet plate negatives, portraits out in the field at these reenactments. In fact, we had Geographic. Sometimes we have different covers for different regions. And this picture was on one of the covers of the story. And I think that if I had been aware of doing these wet plates, that it would have been a great way to shoot the whole story with the wet plate. And I kept Szabo away from Geographic just in case they were smart enough to figure that out too. All of a sudden, I would be relieved of the job. Anyways, I just loved his photography and what he was doing there. These are just two reenactors there. He's just set up a canvas background and made these beautiful portraits, just stunning. And the gentleman who outfitted me is the gentleman on the right here, a gentleman named Robert Lee Hodge. He is the hardest core of hardcore reenactors. And he likes to really be authentic about it and hike from battlefield to battlefield, walk there, not drive there. And anyways, I just read a book called Confederates in the Attic by Tony Horowitz. And he talks about Rob Hodge quite a bit. And this is Mr. Szabo with his setup there. And who knows, maybe I'll get into wet plate negatives here in my retirement. I think they're just beautiful. And then this slide is kind of says a lot to me. And as I was learning about this assignment that I had and how many people died in the Civil War, and it's just overwhelming. I still cannot get over it, and I will talk more about it. But look at that number, 640, is it 620,000? And just to bring it back home, look where we are today and the war that we're fighting right now. Of course, the Civil War deaths, 2% of the population of America, and this is 0.2%. And let's hope we don't go a whole lot further than this. And numbers are numbers, but all of these represent people. And it's something that I try and remind myself about, both with COVID and with the Civil War. It's not just numbers. And you know, it's overwhelming here, the combat deaths and the deaths by disease. Look at that. And then the colored troops all the way to the right, they have their own state. It's called colored troops. And so many of them died of disease because they weren't getting the proper treatment that the rest of the soldiers were getting. And the Confederates weren't keeping the records for the diseases as opposed to the deaths. But in the end, no matter what, the North was going to win just by numbers, sheer numbers. Every day, some immigrants were coming from Europe. They were coming to New York. They were coming to Boston. The population of the North was growing, and not in the South. And so there was, in the end, the North was going to win. But what I learned there, which was really also overwhelming, the new military technology combined with old-fashioned tactical doctrine to produce the scale of battle casualties unprecedented in American history. So the old style of tactical doctrine, well, everyone would just line up, right? When they were shooting musket balls, they weren't going that far. They had to come this close to each other to do harm. And when a ball went in you, you could get it out. And the new technology that arose during the start of the Civil War was this Minié ball, which was had grooves in it, and they had rifled muskets so that they would shoot straighter and farther and do much more damage than the previous technology. And the results were, when you got shot in the arm or the leg, there was no surgery done. There was only amputation. And the soldiers they had ether or chloroform to help them with their pain. And tens of thousands of amputations. And I went to some of these, field hospitals, and they talked about, just legs and arms getting thrown out of the window as the surgeons were cutting off the limbs. So my editor, and there's a beautiful thing about working for Geographic, was it's a collaboration from beginning to end. And so the editor that I worked with is very interested gentleman and enthusiastic. He said, let's get a bunch of these early photographs from the Civil War, right? Matthew Brady, Alexander Gardner, Timothy O'Sullivan. There were so many photographers, mostly from the North, who were shooting wet plate negatives and going out after the battle and shooting what was there. He said, well, let's get some of those and let's go back out to these battlefields and try and do it then and now, which is possible in some places, but most places not. And Bloody Lane and Antietam, and we will visit each of these battlefields. But I was a little overwhelmed by seeing all of these dead bodies here. This is Dunkirk Church in Antietam. I think this picture haunted me more than any other at Cold Harbor. This was a year later, it's 1865, when they came through and tried to find what was left of the dead. The Wilderness, Spotsylvania, also in Spotsylvania County. And I will go into each of these pictures as I struggled to make a picture that would go along with them. Fredericksburg, the Sunken Road. So I'm going to go chronologically. It wasn't necessarily the way I went, but chronologically the way the war went. On July 21st of 1861, just outside of Washington, D.C. in Manassas, that the first battle happened, and there were people that came from Washington, D.C. In carriages to see the battle. They thought it was going to be a pretty simple thing, that the Federals were just going to wipe out the Confederates and the war would be over and that they would be entertained. But that's not quite how it worked out. In fact, it was the other way around. And this was a tavern turned into a field hospital. And this was purchased in 1949 by the US government to make a park around this so people could come to Manassas or Bull Run. And chaos erupted during the war as this particular battle. And it looked like the Federals were going to win, but there was this gentleman with his brigade up on the hill who was not retreating. His name was Jackson. And then from then on, they called him Stonewall because he stood there like a wall. And things turned around, and the Confederates actually ran the Union off, and everybody was in a panic. There was no disciplined army on either side at that point. And the general who was in charge of the army, Irvin McDowell, was relieved by Lincoln, who had been elected, and replaced in July by McClellan. And so now it's McClellan's war, and that's what it looks like now. Okay, so this was our idea, that we could run the images side by side like this, and you could do this with this particular image. And they actually tell people, don't even visit the park in the afternoon during rush hour, because you won't really get the feel of what was going on there at that time. Malvern Hill, July 1st of 1862. And like so many of the battles, and look at the numbers, the Confederates lost almost twice as much as the Federals. But it was so many of the battles had a gently sloping open field. Whoever had the high ground or the protection as the other side would advance, they would just pick them off, and just, it was just like, and so many like that. You've heard of Pickett's Charge. It was like that. And there's so many of the battles seem to be like that, where one side would advance across open plain. And then this is Edwin Jemison, age 17. And the story goes that he got a direct hit from a cannonball, which decapitated him. And so I had this picture blown up, and I went to a reenactment with the thought of maybe I could find some young boy there. This boy's a little older than 17, but I liked the image. And then going to the battlefield there's a little monument there. And again, I'm trying now to capture the feeling of, I would say, death, of the slaughter that was going on, that war is hell. And it's very hard for me because I love nature and I generally make things look much better than they are. So now I'm wearing this other hat where I'm trying to show what I'm feeling. And the feeling is not great and joyful. And then Antietam, the bloodiest day of the Civil War. Look at those numbers, 12,400 US and 10,300 Confederates. And going back there, Dunkirk Church, there's the image that I had to work with. Dunkirk Church is like, it's all pristine now, it's beautiful. How am I going to grab and in an image capture the feeling of what I was feeling when I was standing there? And that was the real challenge for me. Or Bloody Lane, where the Confederates were well protected and the Union came across the open field and it was just slaughter. They just wiped them out until the Union reached the trench at one end, and then it was slaughter the other way because the Confederates were just in the Sunken road. And this is how it looks today. And I'm, lightning would have been good, fog would have been good. I spent a long time there, many days, morning, noon, and night, trying to capture something that would capture the feeling that I had. This is Hagerstown Turnpike, also right there. Sorry if you can hear that, my spam call there. And I kind of felt like maybe I had found the exact spot there, pretty close to it, as they came across the cornfield getting wiped out. And they talk about the entire cornfield, that no corn was standing at the end. That's how many bullets were flying. And I went there, morning, noon, evening, and trying to make an image, okay, it's a little tricky, trickster-like, but I was trying anything. Leaving the shutter open as a car went by. I also flew over in an airplane on a foggy morning. I love fog. We had some beautiful fog the other morning, just stunning. And then there's a tower there that you saw. I went up in the tower, and then, this is the field where the Union came across. It was just getting wiped out. I had a film camera with me, a panoramic film camera that shoots wide and long. And I captured this image, and I really liked this. Kind of was maybe the only image that I felt in the whole story captured what I was feeling about at Antietam. And Antietam was, considered a US federal success as the Confederates retreated, but McClellan did not go after them. And perhaps the war would have ended right there if McClellan had gone after the retreating Confederates. And Lincoln was beside himself and came down and had a discussion with McClellan, who did not think highly of Lincoln either. And he relieved McClellan after this. and he replaced him with Ambrose Burnside. And after this, because it was considered a success for the Union, this is when Lincoln declared the Emancipation Proclamation and said all of the slaves in the South, not the North, in the South will be free if the South does not give up by the first of the year. And you can see in the back of the picture there, there's a house there. I think Lincoln stayed there. And I got this negative and I went to that house that was privately owned at the time and made the shot, always trying to find a way to communicate something about the history and the battlefields. And then back with my editor, trying different combinations that might work. You know, I mean, I don't like this because on the left you have a very significant photograph, and on the right you've got some guy with a flashlight running along making some tricky picture. This picture I liked because I kind of felt like it captured it and it was in the same spot. Then Spotsylvania County, which actually is over, look at those numbers, pretty staggering. And this is the only map I'm going to show you because we could spend the rest of the evening looking at maps. But these are three different battles here: Fredericksburg down in the lower right, and then Chancellorsville and Spotsylvania, and the Wilderness. The Wilderness over to the left, which is where Stonewall Jackson got shot by his own troops. Accidentally in the evening. So I will take you to through this area, not particularly one battle at a time, but Spotsylvania or Fredericksburg lies between DC and Raleigh, which is the capital, Richmond, I'm sorry, which is the capital of the South. And right now it is all suburbia. People who work in DC are building houses like crazy down in Spotsylvania around Fredericksburg. And so again, we have these historic pictures from these battles, and I will talk more about these when we see them in combination. But this is like the epicenter of the battle to save the battlefields, because I mean, it's always development, isn't it? And so the development, I am flying right over the battlefield here, and then the brand new development is encroaching right up to the edge of it. And again, from the airplane. And you talk about hallowed ground. I mean, this is, you know, people have their houses now. The estate of Lee Jackson. This is right in the middle of the battlefield. And this must have been a northern developer. He must have been his sense of humor, or will people probably don't even know who McClellan is. We'll name 2 streets after him down here in the South. So I spent a lot of time going around, and it wasn't difficult to find developments. I particularly liked this picture because I think this guy's t-shirt kind of says a lot. And in Fredericksburg, where they were actually rebuilding the sunken road here, where the Confederates stood behind as they mowed down the Union as they advanced. And then up on the hill to the right is a cemetery of, in 1865 was established the Fredericksburg National Cemetery as the final resting place of more than 15,000 Union soldiers, each one with a number and not necessarily a name. And with the loss at Fredericksburg, which I'll talk about in a second, Burnside, who took over from McClellan, you know, Lincoln said, go down, take Fredericksburg, don't, you know, make haste, go there now and take it. And he went down and stayed on the other side of the river and had pontoon boats made, and it took a long time. And by the time he was done and ready to attack Fredericksburg, all of the Confederates had reinforcements and they were waiting there for them. So, but I've gotten ahead of myself here. So anyways, we've paired together some of these different historic pictures with some of the images that I have taken here. So here we are at Fredericksburg, also known as the Sunken Road, where Burnside took his time building pontoon boats. And by the time they crossed the Rappahannock, the Confederates were waiting in town. They were waiting in the buildings as they were crossing, picking them off, and wave after wave of the Union came. They eventually took the town. And then when they came up to this hill and attacked this Sunken Road, they really got wiped out. And with that defeat, then Burnside's out, and Joseph Hooker now is in charge. So it's kind of like one Union general after another. Now, Gettysburg, how many people have been to Gettysburg? Yeah, that's great. Isn't it amazing? It is so well laid out. Personally, I like Antietam more. For me, it seems like there are more ghosts there than in Gettysburg, but Gettysburg is amazing. And then, and General Meade then was put in charge on June 28th of 1863. And a few days later, on July 1st, Lee pushes up north to Gettysburg, and we have the Battle of Gettysburg. So back to this picture, Devil's Den, a dead Confederate who was dragged there by Alexander Gardner and placed there with his gun. And they know he's been dragged there because there are several other pictures taken in several other places that has the same soldier lying there. I never did that myself. Never moved to leave. Well, maybe I did, but not afterwards, for sure. So I had a negative made up of that because it wasn't very interesting by itself. And that didn't really work. I mean, I worked hard to make it work. But you can see that's how it looks now. You can go there. But I'm not sure you're going to have the feeling like what you would have felt like if you were standing there during the Civil War. And then this picture in particular, I felt like I got the exact spot where this picture was taken. And I drove all over Gettysburg and I walked all over Gettysburg. I know every inch of Gettysburg. I like to walk, and I was looking all the time. And so I was really happy to find this spot and have this Queen Anne lace here. And I kept going back and shooting it at different times of day. I was really happy with this image that we put together. But I also shot other places every dawn and dusk. I was probably there for a week, walking all over. In the back here, you can see the line of trees on the left, and then behind the red barn is the high ground. So this is where Pickett's charge happened, right? The Confederates came out of the woods across the field, charging. I think I read that it was Pickett's first battle, and he led his troops there, and they all got slaughtered. Anyways, it's a shame. But the park had just purchased this Ford dealership, which was next to the park, and they were about to demolish this. So there was an opportunity for me to make an image there and combine it with some good news. I was there in Gettysburg on another assignment on national parks on November 19th, which is my son's birthday. Also happens to be the date that Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address. And there's no images. They came out, the Friends of Gettysburg came out on the 19th, and they lit these luminaries over each grave that was there. Lincoln came there to open up a cemetery for the Union soldiers at Gettysburg. And that's where he gave his Gettysburg address speech. 2 minutes long. None of the photographers were ready because you figure the guy's going to talk for an hour. So we'll take our time. And 2 minutes later, it's probably the most memorable speech that any president has given, maybe. So, and then yesterday in the New York Times, I was looking at this, and yesterday in the New York Times, there was another memorial that caught my eye. This is to honoring all of the people in Los Angeles County. This is the Griffith Observatory. All of the people, all of the residents who have died of COVID in Los Angeles County. And so, I mean, that kind of says a lot to me too, as much as the other one. By Mario Tama, give him credit, Getty Images. And then Morris Island, I went there. And this was the site of Fort Wagner and at the mouth of the Charleston Harbor. And this is where the first Black troop for the Union volunteered to be the first to attack Fort Wagner. And I saw on the airplane, this is actually really nice to do this talk because I watched Ken Burns's documentary, I read 2 books, and I watched this movie Glory on the airplane the other day. If you haven't seen this movie, it's really fantastic. About the 54th Massachusetts, the Black regiment of the Civil War. And so they led the attack. Most of them died to attack a fort, right, on foot. And then that was July 18th. And then the Union smartly thought, you know, we're not gonna succeed here. We'll just shell it. And they shelled it both from the water, from boats and from land. And on September 7th, from July to September, they were shelling it. And on September 7th, the Confederates surrendered the fort. Now there's no fort left there because it's eroded into the sea. And the reason why I went there is there was a housing development proposed on Morris Island. And so, you know, we're always looking to save, I am always looking to save land, no matter what, for whatever cause. And I saw this palm tree there right on the edge. And I thought, well, Fort Wagner's out there. Maybe this will be a nice shot. Always looking, always trying to figure out some way to communicate what it is that went on there. Kind of hard to do, but that was my goal. Cold Harbor, part of Spotsylvania, right? Look at the US casualties. Ooh, what a disaster. And this was that image. This was, it was, the Union soldiers knew that they were going to get wiped out. And this is where they were sewing their names into their jackets so that when they did get shot, people would know them, who they were, and their families would be notified back home. So it's the first use of dog tags. Here, and it was set up like Fredericksburg, where the Union was just going up into well-protected Confederates. 7,000 men died in 3 minutes. And then those 3, I showed you that map, the last 3 Spotsylvania battles, other than Fredericksburg, 50,000 people died. So how do you make a picture of significance? You know, I'm given this to work with, and I go there and it's just a beautiful forest. very difficult, very frustrating for me, maybe a long exposure. I am feeling the horrors of war, and I am seeing beauty. And it was difficult for me to experience and to photograph it. But you get up each day and try again. And then, you know, if you shoot a lot, something's going to work. So, and then Franklin, Tennessee, which pretty much was the last, towards the end of the Civil War. And this was very much like Pickett's charge again, where the Union had the high ground and the Confederates just ran across, attacking and just getting mowed down. Bodies were stacked like cordwood and blood was flowing ankle deep, was one of the quotes I got. So you go there now and you stand there, and what are you seeing? You're seeing development, Walmart, Kmart, suburban shopping centers. You know, I kind of liked that image. And, you know, you do what you can and you just keep working it. Also in Franklin, Tennessee, 15 generals on the Confederate side were killed, and 6 were killed right near this Pizza Hut across the street from the museum that exists there. And when this ran in the magazine, the mayor of Franklin said, "We are buying this Pizza Hut and we are tearing it down, and we're putting a memorial there to the battle." And I was really happy to see that they didn't put a statue there, which would have probably been torn down, but they have a nice pyramid of cannonballs. So this was a good story in our preservation. And then some other doubles that we made, put together here, like this, of Franklin. This is, well, you will see, I will show you. And then there were some good stories that had happened before even. This is a motel in Gettysburg, right next to the battlefield. The Park Service bought it, they tore it down. And when I went there, that's what it looks like now. So it's like, okay, we have preserved. So you're not going from the battlefield to Motel City. And there's a little bit of a buffer there. So we put that together like that. And remember this from Gaines Mill. I went back here towards the end of the story, and that's what it looked like. I kind of stood in the same spot, and you can see they have some fencing they put up. We made up, that's kind of an obvious one. And just the other day, I went online to see what it looked like. And isn't it funny? Someone else took a picture, almost the exact same spot that I stood. And so it's nice to see that they have reclaimed the battlefield so that people can go there and learn about their history. And so this is, in the end, the editor and I work together and we show these images to the editor. Then we go into layout, and I am invited into layout, and I get to have my 2 cents as well. And so this is how it ran in the magazine. And you can go online and get the story and read the story that Adam Goodhart wrote, as well as the captions that go along with it. The Spotsylvania, this is the Franklin, Tennessee image. I was happy to see that the picture that meant the most to me captured the most of my feeling there, run. When we go into layout, we don't have the text, we have the number of words. All 18 stories that I did, when we're laying it out, we just make room for text. It's kind of it's Smithsonian. I got the text, then I shot the story. But at Geographic, we're often out doing it separately, occasionally together, but not usually, because the writer will tell the photographer what to do. That's not good. Or vice versa. And Rob Hodge had that nice picture there along with the reenactment. And Manassas, and the Sunken Road, which had to be put in there. Malvern Hill and Gettysburg. So the picture that I really liked didn't run, but my editor really liked this. So we, you fight it out, and my attitude is, you're an editor, that's what you do for a living. I'm a photographer, that's what I do for a living. So I'm going to listen to what you say. The same thing with the designer. Of course, I'd like my pictures all to run 2-page spread with nothing else. But anyways, that is the spread. And again, it's all about preservation for me, and for whatever reason. And don't we wish that this little tag of "do not cut" was around that tree down on Clubhouse the other day when they came along. The developer came and cut down one tree and burned the eagle's nest there. I'm sure you all heard about that. Yeah, the eagles are not threatened here, but to me, they are part of Rochester. I mean, every time I drive by there, I'm looking, are the eagles there? And they were there the day before. And the DNR gave them a permit to do it. And I am convinced that the developer, who lives in Texas, did this in anticipation that maybe we would catch wind of it, as we have with a development right up the road from the Eagle, which has great blue herons nesting in it. And we heard about this last March as the herons were nesting there, that there's 30 acres and a developer wants to put 10 homes in there. And we immediately, not myself, but a couple of the adjacent neighbors, put a restraining order on cutting. They were going to cut down the trees right away and get rid of those great blue herons like the eagles. And they put a restraining order on them. And so this is a small grassroots group that formed. And it's in the township of Rochester. And north birds are in decline. This is a commercial break here now. Birds are in decline all across the United States and all across the world. And except for in the wetlands, where more wetlands are being protected. And so anything we can do to save habitat for birds or animals is a good thing, I feel. And we have a website called savetherookery.org. We have a huge following, and our following got even bigger after the eagle nest went down the other day. And what we're trying to do is buy the land. But a developer has a purchase agreement on the land. And so the person who owns the land can't sell it to us until the developer walks away. So we approached the developer, and they wanted 3 times what they paid or agreed to pay for the land. And we're not going to do that. So we are just trying to do what's right and save these herons and actually buy the land and turn it into a Minnesota scientific natural area. And that is our hope. And we have quite a following, and we have a really good lawyer who's helping us along. And with that commercial end, I will say thank you. And if you have any questions, we have 3 minutes and 10 seconds.
You work directly with the American Battlefields Trust?
I gave them all of the images. I gave them any of the images they wanted to use for promotion. So I was in contact with them when I was doing this story, Jim Campy, but I have not, you go from one assignment to the next, and it's hard to keep up with everyone. So yes, I did work with them, and they have an amazing organization.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, and I'm grateful to them. Yeah.
Was there ever any discussion about looking at some of the western battlefields, or maybe that was so like Vicksburg or Fort Donald.
Shiloh. No, you know what? There wasn't really much discussion. There was a little bit about going to Shiloh, but that was not my, and I didn't know a whole lot about the Civil War before, during, or after my assignment. Okay, because I'm a busy guy. I'm doing a lot of other things and researching. I researched more for this talk than I think I did for the story.
The interesting thing was, while McClellan and the Federalists were losing in the East, Grant was having success in the
Yes,
West.
yeah, which is why he then became the head general of it all, and then the president later on. Yeah, that is true, but I don't
It'd
know.
be interesting to know what, like, I wonder what Vicksburg looks like today compared to what it looked like when Grant. I wonder if probably flash was Walmart's too.
It is, yes, and that book, Confederates in the Attic, he goes there now and talks about it. And at Vicksburg, I mean, there was another thing that I had read where some of the coal miners from up north had gone, because everybody was held up in Vicksburg, right? And like what, for almost a year. And they had dug a tunnel underneath the Confederates and taken dynamite under them where they were. And they blew up a huge hole, killing many. And then they attacked. And what happened was they had made a crater. And the Federals ran into this crater, and the Confederates just picked them off right there. And there was panic, they couldn't get out because there were other people coming in. But I didn't go to Vicksburg, but I'm reading about that. It's like, oh my God, the horrors of war.
We have some questions come in from Zoom.
Yeah.
So the first question is, have you thought of doing something similar with other wars or maybe natural areas that are threatened?
I've done a number of stories for Geographic, mostly celebrating nature and the wonders of nature all over the world. I did a story on Pebble Mine in Alaska, which pits the copper mine versus the sustainable salmon. And we published that in 2010, and that went really well. And the Army Corps of the EPA ruled that the copper mine, if developed, threatened the Clean Water Act. And so we felt like that was the nail in the coffin. And I, always like it when I feel like that a story in Geographic, which reaches millions, has some effect. And I think it did. And then what happened was the administration changed, and then the EPA ruling was thrown out, and the Army Corps of Engineers were brought in to design for the mine. And then they came back in November of 19 and said, this cannot happen. And so that hopefully is the final coffin in that, and that it will be preserved, because it threatens so many lives, people who are living off the salmon, because I could go on and on and on about Bristol Bay and the salmon fishery there. I spent a month or more up there during the middle of the salmon harvest. But yeah, I'm always looking to, not war. No, I won't go to war. No, I don't mind being killed by a bear or a lion, but not by a gun. Thank you.
And then we had another question. Is your training in art or in photojournalism?
Actually, I went to school for engineering, but then I took a course in art history, and that's what turned me on. And when I picked up a camera, it was the marriage of the engineering and the mechanical and the chemical and art. It was instant art, and that Now I pick up the camera and go click, but when I started, I was very much into the old fashioned where you were shooting a large frame with a cape and a wooden camera, and I was working very slowly that way. So I hope that answers that question. Yes, sir.
How has it changed for you in photography for doing things in the developing of film versus digital? Where I know you're manipulating images digitally, but
Well, the nice thing at Geographic was you couldn't do anything digitally that you couldn't do in the darkroom, okay? You could change the color, you could make it darker, lighter, you could burn, but we're not moving anything. We're not taking a piece of trash out, okay? The picture was perfect, but it had that trash there. No, has to stay there. So I don't like where we've gone. You know, you take a picture and half the time is on the computer, okay? And some of the images I see, I know they're not real. So with film, you went click, that's what you got when it came back. So yeah, I'm old enough to say I'm old fashioned.
thank you.
Okay, well, thank you.
We have one more.
Oh, one more.
Speaking of using older technology, when you were using traditional film, were you more careful about how many photos you took?
That is a really good question. In college, I was taught to think that film is free, which is very difficult to do if you're paying for it. So on my own, no. The nice thing about film is that, and even more so for digital, but with film, your tolerance is very little. So you have to hit that exposure perfectly. So whenever I shot film, I would be a half a stop overexposed, a little brighter, and then right in the middle and a half a stop underexposed. I mean, I got to the point where I was shooting Polaroids when I was shooting the big negatives. I'd shoot a Polaroid and look at that. That would tell me my exposure. Whereas with digital, it's all free. So just keep shooting, and when you're shooting wildlife, I like to say it's spray and pray. That there is that one frame, and I have a camera, and it's an Olympus, where the technology has evolved that I can wait for a bird to take off, and with film or any other camera, when the bird took off and I hit the shutter button, it would be too late. I'd get the tail of the bird. But this camera, the bird takes off, I push the button, it actually goes back 17 frames. So I get every single gesture of that bird. So it's a different world, and it's not one that particularly, I'm really happy to be retired because it's opened up photography for so many people. Which is a great thing. I think any excuse to get out in nature, whatever it is, whether it's fly fishing or camera or golf or whatever, if it gets you out in nature, beautiful, go for it.
So Michael, when back to your film days, if you were on assignment, say in Acadia National Park, and you were there for a couple weeks, how did you view your photos? I mean, how are you getting them processed so you could view and make sure you have what you needed while you were there?
Up until Acadia, when we shot for Geographic, whether it was Traveler or Books Division, whatever, you have a bag of film, off it goes. It goes to Geographic. Then you get 2 phone calls. First,
So you're shipping it to them.
you're shipping it to them. They're seeing it before I do.
Okay.
So the first phone call is to the technician. How do the exposures look? Everything's great. How do the pictures look? Well, I can't talk about that.
So you don't even get to see them.
No.
You're just trusting what they're telling you.
Yeah. So the beautiful thing at Acadia was when I switched to digital, I had my computer with me. So I would go out and every day, every night I could look and see how I was doing. And in fact, put the story together. In Acadia, I had a map and I made little prints because I had a printer because I drove from Mystic, Connecticut. I had a printer with me in the computer, and every night I would make little postcards and pin them on the map so that I covered Acadia and I could see how I was doing. So, I mean, that's the beauty of, digital. You get to see it not only right the second you shoot it, because I think that one of the reasons why I was successful is that technically I could do it. I could go out and shoot film and come back, hand it in, and know it was going to be okay. And not all over the board, all like overexposed or underexposed. So, yeah, Nathan.
I was gonna say, I've heard that that's one of the downsides of digital photography is when you're out there, people are less likely to be in the moment because they're looking at pictures they've just taken and editing pictures they've just taken, in the moment versus actually being there, whereas with film photography, you couldn't do that. So you're more likely to actually be in these special places.
Either way, and when I was shooting, and I do it with this too, it takes me out of the moment. I'll shoot and I'll look. So, but I think maybe you're right. Maybe more with film, I would be so into it either way. But with film, at least at the end, I can put it down and go, wow, that was really cool. Look at this, and enjoy it. Whereas with digital, it's like, wow, that was really cool. I was really here. Let me go share it. Yeah, it's all good. All right, well, thank you for coming. Yeah, appreciate it.